Okay, so we're doing 3.1 graphing quadratic functions, and we're going to use the vertex formula. So this is a really easy way to graph a quadratic function. There's many different ways. So the first thing I want you to do is write down, just 1 second. I want you to write down this quadratic formula. So it's negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Now why do I want you to write it down? Because we're going to use a formula that is just the front part of the quadratic formula. So here we're going to have a formula that's used to find the axis of symmetry. But if you sort of remember the quadratic formula, it's just this part, okay? That's just to help you remember it, because you have to memorize this. So, if you are given a quadratic formula, or a quadratic function in this form, you have to be able to graph it. So what we can do is we can use this formula to find the axis of symmetry. Then we take whatever number this is, we substitute it into our function, and that's going to give us our vertex. Okay, so let's look at a little example. I'm given this function. It has a 2 here, and that's my biggest exponent, so I know it's a quadratic function. And this is a, this is b, this is c. We don't care about c. So if I want to find my axis of symmetry first, I just go negative b over 2a. So b is 2. 2 times a is 1. So if I put this in my calculator, there's a negative there. It's negative 1. So my axis of symmetry is negative 1. So now I'm going to draw a line at x equals negative 1. Then I'm going to find my vertex. I'm going to take this number and substitute it into the function. And I'm going to get this number. Well, if x is negative 1, y is 2. So this now is my vertex. So I graph my vertex. So put it on the point, on the graph. Now I'm going to choose 2 points. I need 2 more points to graph my parabola. What's my easiest point? The y-intercept. So if x equals 0, if I put a 0 into here, well, 1 times 0 plus 2 times 0 plus 3. So if I put a 0 in here, the answer is going to be 3. So this is my easiest point to choose. So this is my first point, 0, 3. Now because parabolas are exactly the same on both sides of the axis of symmetry, if I know this point, it's 1 jump away from the axis of symmetry, I know this point. So I put this point right away. Now I just choose another value for x, any value that looks like it's going to fit on my graph. So here I chose 1. You could choose 2, but if you choose 2, it might be too tall and it might be off your graph. So I say, okay, if f equals 1, I go 1 times 1 squared plus 2 times 1 plus 3. And if I use my calculator, that's going to give me 6. So that's my next point, 1, 6. Here. So if I know this point, which is 2 jumps away from the axis of symmetry, I can put this point on. And then I just connect the dots, and then I have my parabola. So let's do lots of examples. Okay? So it says, graph this function. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find my axis of symmetry. Step 1. Axis of symmetry. So that's that formula I have to remember, minus b over 2a. So this is a, but because there's no number here, it's just a equals 1. And this is b, so b equals negative 4. So I have to go negative, what's b? Negative 4. Be careful. 2 times a is 1. So that's 4 over 2, which is equal to 2. So my axis of symmetry is, I just need a pen. So my axis of symmetry is 2. So when x is 2, this is my axis of symmetry. So x equals 2, axis of symmetry. Step 2, I want to find my vertex. So what I do is I take my function, and I take this 2, and I substitute it into my function. So I go, okay, instead of x, I'm going to put a 2, 2. Okay, that's 4 minus 8 plus 8, which equals 4. So if x is, if x is 2, then y is 4. That's my vertex, 2, 4. So I put a dot like this. Now I have to think, is the parabola going downwards or upwards? So I look in front of my x and I go, oh, it's positive. Because it's positive, it's going to open up. So I know it's going to look like this. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. I just know it's going up because it's positive in front of the x squared. So now step 3, we're going to do our table of values. What's the easiest point to choose? When x is 0. That's my y-intercept. Okay? You don't have to remember that it's your y-intercept. Just pick the easiest one. So if I go f of 0, that means it's 0 squared minus 4 times 0 plus 8. So it's equal to 8. So that's why we choose the y-intercept, because it's so easy. Okay, so that's my first point, 0, 8. So 0, 8. Okay, now this is where we can go, ooh, this is fun. Okay, maybe not fun, but I get to cheat a little. If I know this point is 1, 2 jumps away from the axis of symmetry. And because parabolas are exactly the same on the other side, I can go 1, 2 jumps on the other side, and there's my other point. So if I know this point, I also know that point. So now I'm just going to pick any number that I think might be on this parabola. So if I choose x equals 8, that's going to probably go way off the graph. So I might choose maybe x equals 3 or x equals 1 on both sides. Because they're both positive numbers, I'm going to choose the smallest one. I'm going to choose x equals 1 just because it'll keep my numbers smaller maybe. I don't know. 1 is easier than 3, I think. So now I go f of 1 equals 1 squared minus 4 times 1. And that is equal to 5. So if x is 1, y is 5. So now I have another point, 1, 5. So 1, here's 1, 5. This is 1 jump away from the axis of symmetry. So I know there's another point on the other side, 1 jump away. So now I kind of was right. So see this little draft parabola, but I'm going to draw it correct now. So it goes like this. There. So if you follow these 4 steps, or 3 steps, then you can draw your parabola very easily. So let's do another one. So graph this parabola. So step 1, we want to find the axis of symmetry. So the formula is minus b over 2a. So a here is equal to 1 because there's a 1 hiding. B is equal to 2. So I go minus b, oh not b, b is what? B is 2, put a 2 here. And then 2, a is 1. That's minus 2 over 2, which equals minus 1. So now step 2 is I'm going to take this, let's graph it first. So my axis of symmetry is at -1 when x equals -1. So x equals -1. So now I take my function and I take this -1 and I put it here and I substitute it into my function. And I want to find my vertex. Okay, so here's my function. So I have -1 squared. So that is equal 1 minus 2 minus 8, which equals minus 9. So my vertex is if x equals minus 9, my vertex is minus, if my x is minus 1, my y is minus 9. So that's my vertex. So minus 1, minus 9. So down here is my vertex, right there. Okay. Now I have to think, is it opening down or is it opening up? I'm going to look up here. Because it's positive, I know that it's opening up. So it's going to look something like this. Okay, maybe not so V-like, because they're supposed to be rounder. Okay, let me erase that because that looks horrible. So I know it opens up somehow. I just don't know how. So now step 3, I'm going to use my table of values. What's my easiest point to choose? When x equals 0. That's my y-intercept. So if x is 0, that's 0, that's 0, so I'm left with minus 8. So it's a super easy point to find. So if x is 0, y is minus 8, right here. So that's one jump away from the axis of symmetry. So I know on the other side, one jump away, there's another point. So I have 2 points. From just finding one point, I have 2 points. So now I'm going to choose another point that I hope is on the graph. So I'm going to choose something small. Let's just pick 2. Okay, so now we do f of 2. So I substitute 2 in for all the x's. So I have 4 plus 4 minus 8. That equals 0. Oh, that's lovely. So if x is 2, y is 0. So if x is 2, y is 0. So there's my next point. So how many jumps away from the axis of symmetry? 1, 2, 3. So I know there's another point. 1, 2, 3 right here. So every time I get one point, I can go exactly on the other side of the axis of symmetry to find the other point. So now I can graph it. There. And I'll erase my draft lines. So let's do another one. So step 1, I want to graph it. I want to find the axis of symmetry. Let's not do this one. Actually, let's do the one on page 15. I'm going to do page 15. Page 15. So graph this function. Oops, page 15. Let's graph this one instead. So step 1, find the axis of symmetry. So that's minus b over 2a. So a equals minus 2, b equals minus 4. There's a lot of minuses, be careful. So I put my minus, and then b is going to be minus 4. 2, and a is minus 2. So that's 4 over minus 4, which means it's equal to negative 1. So now I have to put my axis of symmetry when x equals minus 1. Now step 2, I'm going to find my vertex. And to find my vertex, I take my function and I substitute this minus 1 into my function. So I have minus 2 minus 1 squared. Okay, so my vertex is minus 1, 10. So minus 1, 10. So here's my vertex. Now I have to think, is it opening down or up? If I look here, there's a negative in front of my x squared. So it's going to be opening down. So it's going to look something like this. So it's good to think that first, because then you sort of know what you're drawing. Okay, step 3. We're going to make my table of values. What's the easiest point to choose? When x is 0, that's going to be my y-intercept. That means where does the where does this parabola intersect with the y-axis? So if x is 0, 0, 0, 8. So I'm left with an 8. So my first point is 0, 8. 0, 8 right here. So how many jumps from the axis of symmetry? 1 jump. So I know on the other side, 1 jump away is another point. So there's my other point. So now I'm going to choose another number that I know is going to be on the graph. I can choose like maybe x is 1 or x is 2. Let's be brave and pick 2. I hope it stays on, because it might be really skinny and long. So let's do f of 2 minus 2 minus 2. No. Positive 2, not minus 2. Okay, that worked. So if x is 2, y is minus 8. That's still on the graph. Let me sharpen my pencil. Okay, so x is 2, y is minus 8. So here's my next point. So now I have to say how many jumps away from the axis of symmetry? 3 jumps. Now my other point is going to be 3 jumps. Oh, this is really skinny. So now I can connect the dots. Let's erase my draft one. So that's what it looks like. Let's do another one. Okay. Graph this function. So step 1, my axis of symmetry is minus b over 2a minus 1. A equals minus 1, b equals 4. So minus 4 over 2 times minus 1. That's equal to 2. So let's put our axis of symmetry at 2. There. X equals 2. So now step 2, I want to find my vertex. So I'm going to take this number and substitute it into my function. That. And that's going to be 10. So my vertex, if x is 2, then y is 10. So 2, 10. There's my vertex. Now I have to think, is it opening up or down? Negative. So negative means it's opening down. Positive means opening up. So I know it's going to be an opening down thing. So it looks something like that. So now step 3, we want a table of values. The easiest point to choose is x equals 0. That's my y-intercept. So this is 0, 0, so I'm left with 6. So my first point is 0, 6. 0, 6 is here. So how many jumps away from the axis of symmetry? 1, 2. So I know on the other side, 1, 2. There's another point right there. So now I'm going to choose any other point. Doesn't matter. I'm going to try and choose something that might be on the graph. So if this comes down like this, maybe I can choose 5 or 6 or 7. So I'm going to choose like 6. I don't know. You could choose 4, you know, but 4 might be here, you know. Oh no, we already did. If I choose 4, 4 was already done. So if I choose 5, maybe 6. It doesn't matter. Okay, you just pick a number and we'll find an answer. So I'm going to choose 6. So if f of 6, so equals minus 6 squared plus 4 times 6. Oh, they're big numbers. Oh, but it's okay because that's a minus and this is going to be a plus. So that's equals minus 6. So if x is 6, y is negative 6. Okay, 6 minus 6. Ooh, there's my point. So if I chose 7, it might be off the graph. So how far away is this from my axis of symmetry? 1, 2, 3, 4. So here, 1, 2, 3, 4 is my next point. So now I can put these points together. So graph my function. I'm going to erase this stuff here. Okay, that's kind of weird there, but I'll draw it nicer. Okay, there. So I graphed my function. And so you just have to memorize this formula. Okay, so if you find the axis of symmetry, then you find the vertex, choose 2 points, but choose the easiest point when x is 0. That one's super easy. And then you can graph it. Okay?